This video in the Resources on Proof series is about how to start a proof. This video is for the situation where you need to prove a statement, but you're not exactly sure how to go about proving that statement. This video gives you a couple of strategies to help you in that situation. Now, both strategies start with the same couple of steps. The first step in both of them is comprehension, in which you try and understand the logical structure of the statement. Then you move on to reworking the definitions, and in reworking the definitions you're looking for an easy or obvious proof that you may have missed somehow. Now, in the case where that doesn't work, this is where the two strategies diverge. In the examples method, you look at examples that your statement is about and try and discern the reasons behind the examples. And in the syntactic method, you're using the logical structure of the statement. Now, hopefully one of those two directions has given you an idea as to why the statement is true, and from that point on, you can move on to writing the proof. So let's look at the comprehension step in more detail. In the comprehension step, first thing you've got to do is try and understand what kind of objects your statement is talking about. Is it talking about real numbers? Is it talking about prime numbers? Is it talking about groups? That kind of observation. Then you need to identify the assumptions and the conclusions. Which parts are being assumed and which parts do you need to deduce? And from there you can work out the underlying logic, trying to understand whether it's the following are equivalent statement, for example, or are there universal quantifiers, are there existential quantifiers? That kind of comprehension is going on. Then you need to write out the definitions and the meanings of any symbols used in the statement. And then finally, in this step, you're thinking about what you can assume. Where in the course does this come? What results from lectures can you use? That kind of consideration. Having done all that, you're ready to move on to the next step, which is to rework the definitions. Now, reworking the definitions, you're looking for an easy way of proving the statement. So you try some obvious alterations to the definitions, and you try and apply basic propositions from your lectures to the definitions to try and deduce the statement. Now, if that doesn't work, you then move on to one of these two methods. In the examples method, you try examples of your first you take one example that your theorem applies to, and you see whether the statement works in that single example. If it doesn't work, you have a counterexample. If it does work, you then try and broaden the scope of the example. So you try altering it a little bit to see if it still works. And through that process, hopefully, you'll be able to discern the underlying reasons behind why all of your examples are true, which you can then turn into a proof. In the syntactic method, you write out the structure of your proof, and then you leave in gaps for the bits you don't know how to do. So you leave in gaps when you need to make definitions, you'll leave in gaps when you need to make conclusions about those definitions. And then you fill in those gaps, not necessarily in the order that they occur in your skeletal proof. Now, these two strategies, I've suggested that you use one or the other. Some people may prefer to use one or the other due to their personal preference. However, they have their weaknesses, they have their strengths, so if one's not working for you, I really recommend trying the other. We have videos specifying how these two methods can work available. After you've got the reasons behind your examples, or you've filled in the gaps of your skeletal proof, you're ready to create your full proof. And in your full proof, you need to use words and sentences to try and make your proof as readable as possible. You need to make the logical structure clear. So, for example, if you're using the contrapositive, you need to state what the contrapositive is and say, I am using the proof by contraposition. You need to write out the definitions that you're using in your proof. And one tip that I found really helps focus on what information you need to include in the proof is you need to assume that your reader does not know how your proof is going to work. As I mentioned before, we have videos detailing the examples method and the syntactic method in much more detail and giving an example of a theorem where we understand why the theorem is true using those two methods.